Hey everyone, this is Caleb Franzen with Cubic Analytics, and I wanted to make a quick video today to just kind of show you guys this amazing little correlation that I found, and little is definitely an understatement here. In this chart that we're looking at, we are looking at the price of Bitcoin in logarithmic scale, basically dating back to mid 2000 or early 2016. And I've overlaid on top of it the price of a stock called Micron Technologies. Ticker symbol is MU. And this is absolutely amazing because in my entire time studying Bitcoin and even stocks for that matter, it's ridiculously hard to find basically non-macro correlations between different assets, right? So we can obviously maybe find long-term correlations between something like the dollar and short-term treasury yields, which makes sense from a macro perspective. But it's really uncommon that we find two securities that are completely unrelated have such a significant tight correlation for such a long period of time. And this is one of the first times I'm ever seeing that. And as someone who's a big investor in crypto and Bitcoin specifically, and broadly in the stock market as well, this is extremely interesting and insightful and has massive implications for how we should basically be approaching the broader crypto market and Bitcoin specifically going forward. Because looking at a chart like this, first of all, it's amazing, right? And we can perhaps nitpick and find some periods and correlations where we get a bit of a deviation in performance. So obviously, if we're looking here in December 2017, Bitcoin peaked. And we can see around that peak, we had a brief peak in Micron Technologies as well, where we went through this extended consolidation period, basically peaking at $49 a share, getting back down as low as $39 a share. So that's not an insignificant decline, that's about 20%. But we had this big blow off top, another consolidation, another breakout to all-time highs, or at least multi-year highs, followed by a big capitulation down. And during that entire period, Bitcoin was consolidating, right? But however, if we look at when both of them pretty much bottomed, they bottomed right around that same time once again. And I apologize if I'm looking over here. I have my second monitor where I'm looking at the main chart. But essentially we could see Micron Technologies makes a low, Bitcoin makes a low a couple weeks, maybe 4 or 5 weeks before then. Again, we're looking at weekly candles here, so this is a very long-term chart, right? Like I said, going back to 2016. But what we can see is Bitcoin starts to make a higher low, Micron makes higher lows throughout this period. We get another massive extension in Bitcoin back above 12, 13,000. But then we can see here Bitcoin wasn't able to sustain that rebound. And I'm curious to know and dive into this a little bit more. Again, I'm still exploring this. I just came across this chart 20, 30 minutes ago. But we can see Micron was still able to make an extension back towards those multi-year highs. However, Bitcoin wasn't able to do so. Like I said, it peaked back up around 13, just shy of 14,000, and couldn't recoup those highs of 19 to 20,000. However, Micron was able to do so at the beginning of or I should say at the end of 2019, early 2020. As we know, we had the massive COVID decline. Basically, no assets had, or no individual securities had any safety during that period, and we saw a massive rolling over here in Micron and Bitcoin. Micron stock fell from about $59 a share all the way down to $34 a share. During that same period of time, Bitcoin fell from about 10,000 to about 4,000. I think it got, 3,900 around there. So, and basically throughout 2020 and early 2021, we had this massive run up in risk assets, broadly speaking, from my perspective, largely due to the monetary policy environment, the suppression of interest rates. As we know, yields and asset prices have an inverse correlation. So as yields are artificially suppressed by monetary policy, asset prices, all else being equal, have tailwinds to rise. And so everything in this environment probably had a massive run up throughout 2020 and early 2021. However, it's not quite common that we see two assets peak around the same time. And so if we zoom in here on this period, basically from the COVID lows to the run up, They both peaked at the same time. And not only did they peak at the same time, but they had basically like this triple hunch, right? So Bitcoin peaks here, Micron roughly peaked here, we rolled over, get another peak, both of them run up at the same time, another rolling over, and another final peak here. So that's 3 massive peaks or humps, if you will, followed by a sustained rollover into May through July, pretty much. Around July, we saw Bitcoin start to rally back up. This was when we were getting all the news about El Salvador making Bitcoin legal tender, and we had some of these fundamental catalysts kind of return back into the market. If I recall correctly, yields during this time had cooled off, but were starting to pick back up again. And during that period, Micron started to make lower lows, right? Which was really interesting despite Bitcoin kind of coming right back into those earlier all-time highs. Oddly enough, Bitcoin peaks here in November of 2021. And basically in October through November 2021, while Micron was right around those lows, but starting to kind of see a resurgence back up into those highs, right? As Bitcoin started to peak and roll over, Micron actually extended back to new all-time highs, peaking around $97 a share. Now, Micron was able to hold up relatively well at the start of the year, surprisingly. I think a lot of semiconductors kind of fell under pressure around that time, but I don't recall any holding up quite as well through February as Micron did, basically still right there at all-time highs. But since then, right, and Bitcoin was falling during this entire period, really consolidating heavily. If you recall, we had that kind of relief rally back to 48,000. I think a lot of people, even including myself, thought that Bitcoin was about to have another sustained rally back to all-time highs. And as soon as we kind of broke beneath that flag here, is when I really got bearish in early May. But interestingly enough, right, we see Micron really roll over heavily. And today, I believe Micron shares are down about 6.5%, hitting new year-to-date lows. We haven't been this low since Q4 2020. For Micron, we basically have to go back to early mid-November 2020 to see Micron trading at these prices. And what are we seeing, right? We're seeing Micron actually leading the way here for Bitcoin, pushing price of Bitcoin. I don't want to say that Micron itself is pushing the price of Bitcoin lower. There isn't any direct explanation why a decline in Micron stock would influence the price of Bitcoin lower. This is merely a correlation, not a causation. However, I think it is important to recognize, right, that we are seeing this extremely tight correlation between Bitcoin and a semiconductor stock. As we know, Bitcoin mining stocks, or Bitcoin miners, are these heavy GPU processing pieces of technology, right? And so we can maybe tangibly create some correlation between semiconductor stocks and Bitcoin because of that kind of fundamental relationship between semiconductors and Bitcoin mining. But to see the price of these two assets move so tightly over such an extended period of time is really quite amazing, right? And like I said, we can point to these periods where we get a deviation in that correlation, but nonetheless, right, if we kind of zoom out and look really at a macro perspective here, we can see these two assets move in damn near lockstep, right? And so why is this so important right now, right? We can look back at this and say, you know, okay, we can see that this has a tight correlation over the last 5+ years, but what does this do for us going forward, right? And, you know, that's a really fair question. I'm still trying to explore this, so I'm happy to kind of do that live. But basically what we can look at here is, as a Bitcoin investor, right, I would want to see a sustained rebound or reversal in Micron stock in order to confirm an official sentiment shift or reversal in the trend of Bitcoin going back into a bull market, right? If we start to see Bitcoin making new highs here, even on a short-term basis, but Micron stock is still extending to new lows, either on a year-to-date basis or multi-year basis, that would be cause for concern, right? We could see here when we've had these deviations where Bitcoin peaks and rolls over, but Micron remains elevated, that deviation in that correlation didn't last for very long and eventually snapped back, right? Both of them start to roll over tremendously starting in June 2018, basically 6.5 months after Bitcoin peaked. And so it's possible that we'll see on some of these short-term levels a deviation in the relationship here. So I don't want people to get overzealous in identifying a deviation in the trend and saying, oh my gosh, this trend is broken, because what we can see over the last 5 years is that trend does snap back, that correlation does come back into existence. However, if we are looking at this from an opportunistic standpoint, again, we never want to try to catch a falling knife. That's one of my top rules in investing. When the trend is to the downside, let that trend start to show signs of a reversal before buying whatever asset it is, whether we're talking about Bitcoin, stocks, bonds, anything, right? So in this particular case, both Micron and Bitcoin, as far as I'm concerned, are in official bear markets, and the trend is showing that momentum is to the downside. So I don't want to try to catch a falling knife and have a finger get chopped off. I would rather start to see the formation of higher lows and higher highs, right? So we're not seeing that yet. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing the formation of lower lows and lower highs. So in this environment, it's extremely risk off. This is telling investors, hey, listen, pump the brakes. Maybe it's okay to dollar cost average here at a very conservative level, but there's no need to get overzealous in this environment until we start to see the formation of higher highs and higher lows. And not just in one asset, but we want to see that in both, right? Look here, we saw the formation of, perhaps we could, well, I don't want to zoom in because, anyways, basically back in 2018, we saw Micron make a multi-year low. We saw Bitcoin make a multi-year low and start to see the formation of higher lows, right? Bitcoin rallies here, comes back down, and we start to make a higher low. It took another several months from February through June, so 4 months later, for Micron to produce a sustained higher low, but we officially got that trend. We got confirmation that both were starting to make a higher low. And if we saw the formation of a higher low here in Micron and we bought Bitcoin during this period, clearly we didn't do well for quite a bit of time, right? If we bought Bitcoin here at basically 9,000, we just chopped around for the next, basically for the next year and a half, right? We didn't get the blow off top until basically December 2020. So even still, right, we're not seeing a super strong buying opportunity once we get confirmation from Micron, but still we can at least start to see the formation of higher highs. You can maybe make the case that we're seeing higher lows through here from Micron. And, buying Bitcoin back during this period around 3,900, 3,800 was a great buying opportunity. But back here, right, this was a very aggressive trade, in my opinion, to be buying Bitcoin back here. But it's also important to realize that was very close to capitulation in the market, broadly speaking, right? If we remember back to Q4 2018, Q1 2019, what happened from a fundamental perspective? We had a formal shift in the monetary policy environment where after several years of 0.25% rate hikes, the Fed and Jerome Powell formally came out and said, we are pausing our rate hikes. And they even had a formal shift in basically not their mandate per se, but how they were targeting inflation. They wanted to target a long-term inflation rate that averaged slightly above, and I think the formal language that they used was moderately above 2%. And so as we started to get a formal and official shift in the monetary policy environment, did we start to see a reversal back towards risk-on sentiment. And that perfectly coincides with both the low in Bitcoin and the low in Micron that led to a multi-year uptrend. And so when we're looking at the market today, we still have yet to see a formal shift in monetary policy, a fundamental shift in monetary policy that would give me confidence to see a sustained risk-on environment. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. The Fed is getting increasingly aggressive and hawkish in their monetary policy and their rhetoric, right? And so, again, right now, I'm fully pumping the brakes here. I'm not selling Bitcoin. I have fully exited all altcoin positions as of early May and the end of May. So, I'm basically sitting on my hands here. I'm not getting greedy and overzealous around these prices. I'm continuing to stay patient, but I really want investors to be looking at, and crypto investors specifically, for Bitcoin investors to be looking at the relationship here between Bitcoin and Micron Technologies. The stock, again, ticker symbol is MU. That's basically it. I'm going to leave you with that. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter at Cubic Analytics on Substack. Follow me on Twitter. I just shared this chart there within the last hour or so. So if you want to get updates like this frequently, live and weekly free newsletters, be sure to follow my other channels and check me out there. But I definitely had to make a video today to explain this a little bit more in detail. I hope everyone enjoyed and learned something. Take care.